talk about the second part of the time project?
Yeah. But like, I don't know, kind of everybody already say what they were doing. I feel like a lot of people make some stuff against time.
So what you're saying is that we probably already have a head start on everyone.
To some degree.
Our part one is
What's the worst that could happen, alright? Huh? He calls me and I have to be like 1 second.
God damn it. Actually, not that bad.
I know.
I'm very
Worried. You see that one?
very basic.
No, right?
Because you made me elegant.
I'll look at that in 34 pages. How is it done? No. Because it's just sales stuff. I don't get it. I don't really care. And what am I gonna do? Sales, but. No, that's fine. I got this. Forgot my calculator. It's probably fine. It's good. 12 questions. Oh my god. See, why?
I had a teacher.
What would you most likely do?
It went really well. But it didn't go exactly how I expected things to go. I'll say that. We'll discuss. Yeah, we'll discuss. No, what happened?
I watched it today. I was like, oh my god.
Okay, now
Don't play it super loud.
don't play too good. It's actually my volume is supported because I was watching lots of videos of chess earlier.
I didn't go to my first class today. Not because I was hungover, I was just tired.
Did you go out?
Yeah, I went out.
Oh, homegirl. Was that your sister?
No, it's my friend. Just a little I really have and I could not find it. And I walked in the next week. Oh, this is out. And as I'm standing, somebody walks in and the guy's like, what is bathroom over there? Trying to figure out
Did he dress as specific gender?
No, right. It's 27.
Oh yeah.
I was like, the first day of Billy's class, I couldn't find the word for it. Is all to us. I was like, I'm just trying to
Oh, Kelsey is so. I had to use the package to jazz from
And I was like, I just met Isabel. It's the first person I touched.
You're so extra.
I go for you, so. They look the same. I think.
Get your book.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's gonna like, I mean, if it might be,
Like this one's so, I'm so hungry.
yeah.
What?
Yeah. Yes, everyone just needs to.
Oh my god, I wanna be I always get double sugar when
You what?
I was like, why is it? I finesse. So I'm like, if I get a chicken roll and I see them do a big scoop, I'm like, actually make that double chicken.
Yeah,
If
but
I say
yeah,
double
we
chicken
just
right
go.
away, don't give me as much.
Yeah.
So like, oh, she's good, I was like,
Yeah.
did you get extra?
Oh, you do actually.
Yeah, it's extra, it's extra.
Yo, I was like, I just saw someone snap.
Oh, fuck, 14 questions? That's why it's 36. Okay, okay.
I tried to leave it to you, cause like, as much change on it, and I was like, yeah, it's somebody.
Would you care for some shit?
See what he's doing? I know, right? As soon as you bring up Chipotle. Of course I want to go. Chipotle.
I was telling her we should go.
You know what? Like, I'm not sure what I want to do, but I want to do successful. I'm gonna go with my head job. No, don't put it on me. No, this is all I'm doing. Don't you cheat like that.
I'm asking you, you live in the house.
Sorry, fine.
I want to be honest.
You're like,
Yeah.
I don't have pizza ready. My gas bill just, I feel like I just paid my gas bill.
No, I didn't. I set up like an
Oh yeah, I did. They're all what?
1 second. Well, wait, I'm doing an assessment.
Mine was like.
You're so smart job. You have got me. I'm gonna say I do my job, I do
You just wanted a fork.
That is
I did what you asked me to do, not more than
Like,
that.
you didn't ask me to create a web application. You did like a form. What did you do for your test?
Yeah, I know. It's like, it's hard. It's so
I did. I got
kind of other.
Not enough for people.
That's true.
Yeah, right.
That was our first interaction. Me going to the next bed.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, to you.
Billy was like, so did you find it? Yeah, we went to the museum. I was like, are you kidding me? Yeah.
I'm being paid.
I was like, don't say anything. She's like,
Were you embarrassed?
I was so embarrassed.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, fuck! There are 2 sessions. You're like, oh no.
Just like, should we record? I think.
No.
Should we let us know?
Should.
But you know that probably will not happen.
Who's running an hour?
Oh, I didn't write anything.
What's your run rate exactly? Don't even bother.
This was last night?
Which I could have just got those 4 points. What did you get?
I'm doing something. Why did I? Oh, well, no, this next assessment is not. You should work quick. Right, you skipped like, I don't remember.
So I'll just count those 4 points.
So what, you just gave me the certificate?
Trying to be part of the production problem.
Whatever helps you.
Did you comment using your phone?
That is most likely.
On the because she was asking for us to comment on her.
All right, hi. I'm becoming that professor. This is my 10th semester at IIT, and this is the latest I've ever been for class. Glad we got it on tape.
Because you were the one who
No, I haven't. I did it today.
Put this in the highlight reel when I retire. Oh God, I've got like the worst headache, Rosa. I've swallowed. I took like a handful of them in my office an hour ago, and all it did was to irritate my headache. So I don't know how long I'm gonna last. I did get the microphone on since I'm podcasting. I did finally, after 3 weeks, finish all the comments and grades on Project 1 and your midterms. I apologize profusely for being so late with those, but they're done now. So, and the midterms are posted up on the Wackadoodle banner system as well. So how are you all doing? I guess it's dependent on whether you checked your email or not. Today we're supposed to talk about usability. Let me talk about 3 points of usability that emerged from your projects. I don't know why this message keeps getting lost on you, some of you, but you are in love with this pattern, with this way of laying out a page where every line of text is centered and things are here, and then there's a checkbox here, right? Why is that not usable? I know you think that this is just some strange designerly thing where I have this weird fetish about putting everything on a left alignment like that. Why is this a problem? Why is this a pain in the ass to read, to fill out? Alejandro.
Because it's much easier to do the upper left one because like it's and then your eyes know all the way to just go back.
Right. You've created a sight line for somebody's eyeball, which I shall draw like that. Whereas here, we have this wacky in and out, and there's nothing. I mean, I've drawn this to be fairly predictable, where you're diving in and out at intervals, but it's not unusual to see something like this where you have this tiny little line, and this longer line, semi-long line, short line, long line, right, where you have somebody's eyeball darting in and out. That gets incredibly exhausting. Okay, especially, okay, mobile size screen, you want to center a line of text, no problem. I gotcha. Probably if the line is short enough on a mobile screen, sure, go ahead and put that little bugger right in the middle. But when the screen starts getting big and you get these really drastic changes, and some of those things are form elements and some of those are labels for a form element that's drastically smaller or drastically larger than the thing that it's labeling, that's just a nightmare. Okay? Tons of you are not using media queries to build up layouts for larger size screens. Although shout out to somebody who had a 960M breakpoint. let you do the math in your head. How big is 960 Ms? It's about 15,000 pixels. I want to come to your house and see your monitor with the 15,000 pixels on it, right? Be careful about those M units. Again, just like we want to create nice, consistent sight lines down the screen, when we get to these larger screens, don't just blow up the text and then you have your sad like image that gets cropped off and really huge text like that. Use all of this space to your advantage. Keep your image so that it works, so that the whole thing is visible, and then have another column of text here. Then you've got strong sightline here, strong sightline here, and likewise across there. Okay? There's nothing inherently wrong about diagonals, right? If you want to be all avant and create some kind of layout like this. Let's say you had a form like, I don't know why you would do this, but like, there's a label, and there's a label, and there's a label, and there's a label, and then yay, you're done, right? Where you've got, that might look a little funny. There's no way it's going to work on mobile, but you at least have a consistent sightline across there so people know what they're doing, right? What's the title of the book that we're reading about usability? You should love this title. It's the best title. Nope, Stephen Krug is the author. Don't make me think, right? God, get that tattooed in reverse on your forehead so you can see it when you look in the mirror every morning, right? Don't make me think. If your layout is unpredictable, right? You're doing things like this. Even for that microsecond that somebody's eyeball has to flip around, or there's a label that's distant from the text input box or something like that. You're causing these little moments, I've said this word before, probably not enough, these moments of friction, right? What is friction? Physics 101. Coefficient of. Who's a gearhead in here? Somebody had some car things. Moses, did you have a car? Who had a car in their project? No, at Project 1, somebody had like a sign up for like automobile. I'm sorry, Moses, if it wasn't you. Right? I mean, what makes a car go fast? Okay, well, but you need some friction, right? And that's how the wheels stay. If you had zero friction on your wheels, they would just sit there and spin, right? A couple of bald tires just, right? So we need some friction to get going. But in terms of momentum, what slows things down? Resistance, aka friction, right? Be nice. If you watched Reddit yesterday, they had this awesome video of a golden retriever on an ice rink. And the guy was throwing hockey pucks, and the dog was like running down the ice rink. It was the most adorable thing you've ever seen. Okay, not a lot of friction on an ice rink. That's kind of how hockey works. You can't play hockey on grass. Go get yourself a pair of ice skates. Get out on the grass. Okay, doesn't work so well. So we want to avoid friction. And one of the ways that we help people avoid friction is that we create visual hierarchies. Since I feel like drawing abstract things today, let me draw some more abstract things. Where is the third least important object in these three sets of boxes? Third least important. Okay. Right? least important, third least important, right? I deliberately asked the question that way because that's friction. We don't usually think about things in terms of third least important, right? We think of things in terms of most important, second most important, third most important, okay? When you've got 4 boxes lined up like this, you can pick out the third one, no problem, right? Third most important? Come on, Sesame Street. Third most important. Okay. If you think about it, but I'm willing to bet in your brain it takes a microsecond to do this. Why? Why does this take longer? Even if it's, again, when we're talking about interface design, we're not talking about a big moment of waiting and figuring something out. We're talking about something that just is below your level of consciousness in terms of it making you work a little bit longer.
I think it might have been like the way you're taught to count in that kind of context.
Mm-hmm.
So you automatically are taught to go left to right, but like you reach the end of the spot, so you have to decide whether to go to the bottom left or the bottom right.
What if we had 5? Am I still looking at the third most important element? Right? I mean, we can mess with this endlessly and start putting more and more boxes here. Right? Now I'm tempted to think this is the third most important thing. Or maybe this one is. I don't know. Okay? The idea is if we can keep strong lines, strong numbers of things, so that you can glance at it, that you don't have to count, that you don't have to make little judgments in terms of is it more important that something is to the left or that it's down or it's up. Right? We achieve this kind of form. What is this in psychology? Do we know what this is called? It's a great German word. Gestalt? Ja, no, Gesundheit. Gestalt? What does Gestalt mean auf Deutsch? What's that? You have no idea. Okay? It means form. Gestalt psychology. Right? You ever go around the city and see like an old sign and it's got light bulbs in it that blink, but it doesn't look like a bulb that's sitting there blinking and blinking and blinking. It looks like there's some kind of pattern that's chasing around. Right? Everybody know what I'm talking about? I know now it's just the bright LED lights framing things that just flash at you in traffic and temporarily blind you. Anybody got that in their neighborhood? Come to my neighborhood. That's all the rage. Big, bright LED lights framing the windows of your business. My favorite restaurant in my neighborhood like blinds you on your way in. Like just really bright lights. Gestalt is why we tend to see that kind of thing. What's the psychological test that you can have done to you that's all based in Gestalt psychology? Right? I'm going to spell it wrong. Rorschach. There may be another R in there someplace. Ink blots, right? You take a piece of paper and you fold it in half and you dump some ink in there and then you smush it together. And you get something very similar to what I drew on the board over there, where you get some kind of shape, right? It's completely abstract, but then you're quizzed about what you see. I always see like characters from like fantasy novels, like armored animals and things like that. I don't know what that means. I've never been formally tested. Go take a psychology class and let me know what's wrong with me. Okay? Right? What is it about, like, how can we, right? You've seen similar kinds of things, less ominous, where we have, can't draw it today. Try to do it in mirror image, right? Where you see either some kind of cup-like thing here in the middle ground, or you see two faces, right? If this is a nose, right? What is your brain doing in that? You ever seen those pictures of fruit? And if you look more carefully at the picture of fruit, it's actually got a face in it. right? Or any of those great websites like Stuff in, or Faces in Stuff, right? Where you see a automobile grill, right? Like those big, ugly, what are they? Right, where you start to see faces in things. Or even like the little holes in the electrical sockets in the walls, right? That have this very kind of Nintendo, oh, right? It's a face. Okay? You weren't taught this. This wasn't kindergarten. Today they're going to figure out what the face is in the purse or the nails in the chair or whatever it is, right? What does your brain do naturally? Okay, it groups things, right? We do all kinds of interesting things with blocks of things, right? Right? Most of us will see not 8 discrete squares up there. We'll see 3 groups of squares, right? That's biologically ingrained. We try to look for patterns. Why do we look for patterns?
Makes it easier for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you can recognize patterns, then you have less cognitive load in terms of what you're trying to manage. Okay? Which if there's some huge fanged creature running out of the forest at you, you want to be able to quickly distinguish woods, woods, clear path down the binner. Not individual tree, lots of blades of grass, moon, my friend with a spear, way too far away, right? We focus on this stuff. Right? So we want to use these kinds of things when we're doing design. Right? And again, a lot of this stuff, it doesn't necessarily hit you right in the face. It takes a while to consider it, right? If we have a block of text, and another block of text, and a heading kind of situated here, right? Where do we want to put that heading? Well, assuming, let's say there's another heading up here. Heading, block of text, heading, block of text. Right? We should close this up. Why close it up, Rosa?
So it could be easier to identify what heading was to wide body.
Yes. Pure Gestalt theory, right? Here, we've more or less got 4 things on the page to manage. If we close this up, heading here, heading here. Now we've got 2 things on the page to manage with a nice big label. It's subtle, right? It's still the same text. We're not writing anything. We're not changing the colors. We're not adding in CSS animation effects to make it fly in from the side. We're just doing really dumb things to help manage the complexity that we'd introduce otherwise if we didn't group these things together, right? Why a baseline grid? Aren't you sick of hearing about baseline grids? It's been since August. Baseline grid. Why a baseline grid? Who cares? Just eyeball it. Put your text on rows based on how you feel. You could. Plenty of designers do. Plenty of pages look that way. What is advantageous about a baseline grid? It's uniform. Why is uniformity good?
Yeah, that's it. It makes it easier for perception of the individual.
Easy for perception, right? Because it's a rhythm. It's another pattern that we start to expect, which is way different from something that's more haphazard, right? And even here I'm falling into something that's pretty rhythmic because it's got that, right? Eeny, meeny, miny. Why did you have to do that? I wanted to drive the OCD among us crazy by not saying mo. Except maybe it hit you first. So you had to say mo, right? Right? We not only look for patterns, we tend to complete things, right? In our heads. Okay. So, what questions can I answer about anything so far in this class? Because I am going to die from this headache if I try to teach anything new. Sorry to disappoint. But I will answer questions about anything. I can pull out my computer and do some code. How are things going with Project 2? Yes, Alejandro.
Can you direct us to good sources to learn about JavaScript still?
Yes. There are two things that I'd recommend for JavaScript. The first is just the boring, square, there's an MDN tutorial site for JavaScript. Go through that. A lot of it will be beneath you. A lot of it will explain things that you don't really need explaining. Okay? The second place to go, and this is actually assigned in 361, I think, is the Moraine Haverbeek. His name gets more confusing. Haverbeke. He has a book called Eloquent JavaScript, and it's in its second edition. He has a preprint version available on the web for free, so you can certainly give him your money for the final polished book, but the basic gist of it with a few minor errors is up on the web. If you just Google for Eloquent JavaScript, you'll find it. Okay. The other book, once you've read the Haverbeek book, once you're confident with the MDN tutorials and all of its introductory material on JavaScript, Douglas Crockford, C-R-O-K, Crockford, has a book called JavaScript, the good parts, which there's a great joke because it's put out by O'Reilly Media. And if you get the full O'Reilly Media book on JavaScript, it's like this thick. If you lay it on its back in JavaScript, the good parts is like this thin. So the joke being like that, like most of JavaScript is just shit, and here's the good parts, right? This is like, hold off on this one until you really feel confident with what's in the Haverbeek book, because it goes into some pretty advanced theory about JavaScript and really gets into how it's put together. But it's really good for mastering how the language works and why it behaves the way it does and why you can concatenate a number in a string, but you can't multiply a number in a string and all that. JavaScript is the thing, and I saw this a number of times in your projects where people were declaring functions, right? You said function, form submitted, and then alert, like congratulations, your form was submitted. And then in your memo, like, for some reason my function didn't run, right? Why wouldn't it run, Rosa? Yeah, you got to call the function, right? You can't just say function, right? That's like saying I'm going to have a party and making an awesome invitation and then hiding it in a shoebox and then being surprised that nobody comes, right? You actually have to send out an invitation. You have to call people, right? JavaScript is an evented language, okay? It's all based on events, which makes sense because in the browser, that's what we're doing most of the time. You're not constantly running JavaScript, right? It's not like JavaScript sits there and spins. It's listening for things. It's listening for the DOM to get loaded. It's listening for somebody to start filling out a form. It's listening for somebody to click on something. It's listening for whatever event it is that you happen to be listening for, okay? And again, if you're using jQuery, jQuery has a lot of methods built in that are event specific. For example, there is a submit event in jQuery, and there is a click event method in jQuery. Get out of the habit of using those shorthands and use the generic on. And then the advantage to using on is you can listen for multiple kinds of events simultaneously. So we can listen to click, we can listen to key up, right? And then you pass usually an anonymous function into this thing. And then you put this E in here. What is that E? Yes, it's shorthand for event. It's a local variable, so you can write out event if you want to. Okay? Where does that come from? So this is why it's really important to read the docs of this stuff. So we have a function, we do something, right? Then we close out. This is the other part, like, honest to God, 99% of JavaScript is just making sure your damn curly braces and your parentheses all match up. Right? It sucks. And especially it sucks because when you get a whole bunch of those things stacked up at the bottom, they look like the little dude that used to be on the Pringles container with the big mustache. Right? It's like this weird kind of winking, sad face, chin mustache guy. Right? Again, learn to read these things. Learn to, as soon as, like, before you write anything on here, if you call the on method on, open the parentheses, and then immediately, before you do anything else, I know it's way more fun and sexy and exciting to work up here, close that parentheses. Just like that. And as soon as you open up that function, you open up that curly brace, close the thing right away. Okay? Now, part of what I think is happening when people have these sad little functions that never execute is that the syntax looks very similar. We say function, hi, and then what, name or something like that. And we just say console log hi, comma, end, right, whatever it is. Versus an anonymous function where we say function, in the case over there, well, we could just do the end thing here. This is an anonymous function, right, which is going to be executed immediately in whatever context it's called, right? Here we're saying as soon as you hear a click or a key up, run this function, okay? Whereas when we're doing a function definition over here, we're saying function hi. That's just loading up a function here that's going to be executed later at some point in the future. Okay? Again, not a great, I mean, this is a fairly, do you know of other languages that have anonymous functions like that? Where you could just say function and then do something? It's kind of a JavaScript-y thing. I think Lisp has something similar. But by and large, this is kind of a JavaScript-y thing. Okay? PHP, I don't think there's like anonymous functions there. You have to say, here's my function, and then you call it. Right? So I think that's part of what trips people up, are those anonymous functions. Why use anonymous functions? We usually use them in situations where we just have some one-off thing, right? Where it doesn't make, we're going to do, add has.js to our HTML tag. We don't need to go through like a whole function has.js, do all of this stuff, and then just call it again if it's only the once, right? We use the anonymous function to just do something that's only going to happen once. If we're going to be repeating it a lot, or if we've got a lot of complex variables or something we're passing, then it makes sense, yeah, go ahead, write your function definition, go nuts. Okay? The other two keys to JavaScript. Right, what's this keyword? Var. Var, I like to say var, var. What is it? Okay, variable, right? We always want to use this keyword. But we don't want to use a lot of variables. What is a better option than this? Right? People love variables, especially beginning programmers. Need a variable for everything. This comes right back to the Gestalt psychology thing before, right? 1 box, 2 box, 3 boxes. How can we go and make one form out of this? Possibly an array. What's our other option besides an array? Say it again. Well, if we just did something like var user, and we put TK and I don't want to guess TK's age, so we'll say something ridiculous like 86, and because nobody will guess that, 86 and Chicago. We could put all of that information. I don't know about that, if that's true about TK either, but we could put all of this stuff into an array. Problem is how do we find out programmatically in the middle of the script, how do we figure out how old user TK is? What's the syntax for that? Got to use our square braces like that, right? Which, Rosa, if you just encounter that line of code someplace, who the hell knows? You've got to actually see that whole variable string. And then, of course, if elsewhere in the script you're manipulating this, you're adding or removing values, right? You've got to do it in a very precise order, right? What is the HTML tag that is most like an array? An array is a list of things. So which HTML list type is most like an array? Right? Here we're trying to force an order. We got to say the person's age always has to come second, right? That's not a natural thing for arrays. Usually an array is, here are all the colors that we offer. Here's all the flavors of ice cream we sell. Here's all of their, although even that, like answers to a quiz, those are often stored in an array. Okay? So what's our ordered list analog in JavaScript? Right? Here we can basically reuse all of these nice variable names, but now instead of equal signs after them, we put colons. Right? So we can say TK, and there's our comma, right? Separated just like items in an array. And we can put 86 as an age, and we can put Chicago as a hometown, right? And then we wrap this whole thing inside of curly braces, and we just do var user equals. That's a really funny looking one. Right? So now how do we get the age of this user? No, because all of this stuff in here is part of this user object. Yes, right? User dot age, right? And that's going to equal, in this case, 86, right? So when you see something, say something. No, when you see something in jQuery like $, ID, someone's going to get shamed for this, button, right? Maybe you have ID button. That's walking that line between semantics and presentation. Button.on. What do we instantly know about this clump of stuff here? What is it? By virtue of this dot, extrapolate with me. User dot something. User is a what? Oh my God. Does nobody honestly know this, or are you just, what's that? Yes, it's an object, right? That's what this is. User, object. In this case, an object literal. We're not using a constructor or anything fancy like this. We're just saying this is an object, right? Over here, we see a dot. And dots are basically only used for that and one other purpose in JavaScript. The other purpose, of course, is as a decimal point, right? That's a different use for a dot. So when you see a dot, you know that the thing before it is some kind of object, right? And specifically, it is the jQuery object alias to $. And of course, if you don't want to use the $, or if you're doing something fancy, you can call the jQuery object directly, which just so happens to have what's called here a method, which is identical in almost all ways with a function, right? So if we wanted to do a method on our little object over here, we could say half age function. Right? And now here we're defining a method, and we can do something like this, where we say this age divided by 2, and we'd probably go a step further and say return this age divided by 2, so that we could do user half age. And when we run that, in this case, we're going to get 43, right? Because it's going to take 86 divided by 43. That's the big difference between object-oriented programming in JavaScript, is you get this thing. It already understands that it has this property called age. If we're doing this any other way, if we're just writing a function called half age, what do we have to do that we didn't over here? Right? See any variable being passed in there? Nope. We don't have to, because the one thing that we're interested in, we're going to get care of this, right? Whereas here, we actually have to pass in an age variable, and then we're going to return our local variable age divided by 2. Right? So when we call half age, we need an argument in there. We don't get a this. We don't get self-awareness of some object that's floating around in space. Okay? Seriously. The road to mastery in just about any language I can think of that has them is objects and arrays. Right? The singleton one-off variable like var name, in anything but the most elementary scripts, name or age or account balance or whatever you can think of, is usually part of some larger unit of things that we're interested in. But if all we do is say var age, var name, var hometown, there's nothing in the program other than our human eyeballs to connect those things and say, oh, probably talking about a person or a user. Here we're explicitly saying, hey, there's this thing that lives in our script that we're modeling called a user, and that thing has a name and an age and a hometown. Okay? You see the difference? It's subtle. Right? And even if we're doing complex functions and stuff like that, usually rather than passing in a simple variable, we could do things like have a nice little object of options that we can pass in, so that we're not doing 10 arguments into a function. We're doing one argument that expects an object that's structured in particular ways. How's it going, Aaron? Yeah? Other questions? That was a good one, which spiraled out of control. Other questions that you have? One more thing I'll say about JavaScript. Don't litter your HTML with stuff like this. Okay, I saw this places, right, where this was written right inside your HTML, an empty div element or an empty paragraph element. Those were the two that I saw the most, right? This is in your HTML. What is this doing here? Like, reason out. Why did somebody write this?
They plan on using it later.
Right. Someplace in their JavaScript they have ID response and HTML, right? Accepted, right? Which, of course, when whatever happens that fires this, like somebody submitting the form or something, then it has this div here that's all ready to go. Okay? What we generally want to do instead of that is use what structure that we already have, right? For example, maybe you have something like a section ID sign up, let's say. And because you ran your HTML, this is becoming a problem. When you use the section element, when you use the article element, you must immediately open with the heading tag, or your HTML will not validate. You cannot just arbitrarily stuff content into a section or an article element. It has to have a heading. So we might have H2 sign up, right? And then here's our form, right? Whatever. So, and then instead of having this empty div here, let's use what's actually on the page, right? Now we can say, rather than having a special response div, because again, reason out what this thing is doing. This is some momentary thing that somebody's going to be like, cool, right before they close your browser tab or go to another page. We don't need to have some special element here. Let's just grab ID sign up, grab this section, right? We could even go, well, actually, in this case, let's go ahead and just grab this ID sign up. And then HTML, we could even patch in a fresh A2 or H2. Signed up. Right? So now what's going to happen, instead of that little superfluous div laying around that has no job, right? Now we're just saying, hey, you know what? When somebody has signed up, go ahead and wipe out all of the junk inside of section ID sign up, and let's replace with a heading 2 that says signed up, which of course the visual effect here is, we'll say signed up, right? And then the rest of this form is now obliterated, so this is just going to close up real nice. Yeah, Matt?
So then what happens if they accidentally mess up and they click submit and it wipes out everything?
Okay, so that means we're going to do some, right, in our JavaScript, we wouldn't just accept this. We'll do whatever checking we need to do first. Right? And then we get to this. You're absolutely right. We don't want to do this right away and be like, signed up! Oh, wait, actually your email address is whatever, you know, right? Or you're missing this field. We want to do those checks first. Now, the other thing that I saw in a lot of JavaScript in Project 2, and of course you see this in JavaScript all over the web, is that people were using alert. Please, you know, put in a phone number or something like that, right? And doing these multiple times, like, please enter a name, please enter a phone number, please enter a birthday, please enter your favorite car, right? And so you get a whole stack of these things. What happens when you call these alerts in JavaScript? Like, what is the behavior in your browser? Yeah, it's a pop-up. And it is a blocking pop-up, meaning that until you click OK, you cannot scroll, you cannot pass go, you cannot collect $200 for the Monopoly players in the room, right? It freezes everything. If you stack up multiple of these, two things are going to happen. One, you are guaranteed to piss off your user, because now they've got to hit like OK 3 times. By the time they've clicked OK on the third thing, they have no idea what it was that they did wrong that you were asking them to fix. Okay? The other thing is that if you've got a browser from a good home like Firefox, it's going to have its own pop-up, and it says, do you want to let this site have pop-ups anymore? And most people are like, hell no, because that's annoying, right? And then what? If this is your last line of defense, and somebody switches that off and there's other forms or stuff on your site, then you're sunk, okay? Use your DOM scripting, right? So if we've got like a label, label for, email, let's say, use that, right? Right down here, we can do for, why doesn't that look right to me? For email. I mean to write an attribute selector. I'm not writing it correctly, but we could say, do this, and then we can change the label, say like, please enter email address or something. With a pop-up alert, the location of that thing on someone's browser is completely arbitrary. And if it's on a mobile phone screen, it's entirely possible you'll have some big alert that pops up here when in fact your long scrolling form, the problem area is down further, right? So if we use DOM scripting in a smart way and just change the HTML around the problem element, right? We could add a class to the input like error that gives it a nice big threatening warning red glow around it or something like that. Then we're not only reporting the error, but we're also helping to direct somebody's eyes where the error is actually occurring. Instead of like a big, like, you did something wrong, pop-up box that's just out there in space. You see the difference? Right? This is why I like thinking about DOM scripting more than JavaScript, right? We always want to be manipulating something about that document, making it usable, turning that thing from just a bunch of dumb, boring HTML on the page to something that's living, that you can interact with, that will tell you if you've done something wrong or help you to correct an error, right? That said, again, keep your friction to a minimum. Despite, I feel like that first couple of weeks in class, I said this every day, like a dozen times a day. First name. Last name. Right? And those two get together and have a baby and call it MI, right? And that's the problem, is that form elements tend to like, oh, well, we need to have their middle initial or something like that. What is the problem with this pattern? Okay, so the Cias and shares of this world are in big trouble. Make sure you're looking at your stuff on a mobile phone. And don't just be like, oh, sweet, my form. Fill it out every time, right? If you're on a desktop and you just have to like click, or you can hit the tab key on your keyboard to get field to field, not a big deal. On a phone, it's a pain in the neck. And to what end? Why can we not just get rid of all this nonsense and ask for somebody's name, right? We're probably not going to have users who would be like, oh, they only asked names, so I guess I should only tell them Carl, right? We usually write in our full names there. Okay. Again, we're trying to reduce friction. The more things that somebody has to click on, the more things they have to think about, right? If you're from an Asian country, your Western sense of what your first name is different from what your Western sense of a last name is. And so what is that person to do? Right? Do they transpose their name to fit Western culture? Do they go, like, again, you're making somebody think. If we just say name, write your name. Right? And especially if it's something like signing up for an email list or coupons or something, who cares if we have their exact first and last name? Especially because no matter what country you're from, it's very easy to parse out a name. Computers are great for this kind of thing, right? If we see 3 blobs of something, we'll assume that middle thing is an initial. If we see a hyphen in TK's last name, we'll just keep that thing together. That's her last name. Done. Right? And again, I understand. I don't think any of you are evil in saying, ooh, I need a first name box and a last name box. Why does somebody do this? I don't think they do it to irritate me, although it does. but I don't hold it against them personally. Say it again. Okay, so if your database has an F name and an L name column, your knee-jerk response as a developer is to match the interface to the database, right? Even though we're only one split string between getting this in the back end away from the view of the user, right? But why else would somebody split first and last name up into separate boxes? Force of habit, and specifically, where does that habit come from, TK? Before you start school? Sure, right? Those standardized tests when you're a kid. There's a box for your first name and a box for your last name, right? You see forms all over the web that have split first and last name boxes, right? So we're just replicating these patterns, right? This is a phenomenon I like to call the most photographed barn in America. Anybody ever read Don DeLillo's White Noise in English class? It's an okay novel, but there's this thing in it called the most photographed barn in America. There's this big red barn, and every weekend you can go out there, and there's hundreds of photographers photographing this barn because it's the most photographed barn in America. But it's the most photographed barn in America because everybody knows it's the most photographed barn in America. So everybody goes out to so in proclaiming its status as the most photographed barn in America, it draws more and more photographers, and so that's what's known as a tautology, right? So we have this tendency to do these most photographed barns in America, right? See a particular pattern all over the place, replicate it. Sometimes that's a good thing, right? There's nothing wrong in the world with having your contact information at a URL like /contact, right? Instead of say hello, say hi, drop us a line, right? Whatever casual thing you're trying to do. Sometimes we want to go with convention. But if we can reason it out that the convention is silly and we can get by with something that's just as good, going to get exactly the same information and stay out of the user's way, it makes a lot more sense to do that particular thing, right? What else? Other questions? Concerns? All right. Well, I don't want to hold you hostage. So I guess I will just see you Wednesday and we'll pick up usability for real. And hopefully I won't have a headache.
I don't have that.
You do have Advil in case? Thank you. And Excedrin? Problem is Excedrin has caffeine in it, and on top of what I've already consumed today, like, I'll need to be put in restraints just to get out of the building. Like, all right. Have a good whatever today is. Monday. Thank you for that. Sorry I was late.